In the skies over Europe during World War II, German soldiers often believed that shooting down an American bomber was only a matter of time. Yet in 1943 and 1944, countless Luftwaffe pilots found themselves stunned and bewildered when B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators returned from missions with entire tail sections missing, yet still managed to fly hundreds of miles back to Allied airfields. One of the most remarkable incidents occurred during a raid on the German industrial city of Regensburg on August 17, 1943. A formation of B-17 bombers, part of the U.S. 8th Air Force's Deep Penetration Strategic Bombing Campaign, was intercepted by skilled Luftwaffe fighter units. Anti-aircraft artillery shredded the sky with bursts of flak, while Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s launched coordinated attacks on the formation. In the chaos, one bomber was struck so severely that the entire vertical stabilizer and rudder were destroyed, leaving only a jagged stub of tail. The Germans assumed the plane was lost. Yet, to their astonishment, the aircraft maintained controlled flight and returned safely to England. This phenomenon was not isolated. Throughout the summer of 1943, German ground observers and fighter pilots repeatedly reported witnessing American bombers staggering back to their bases, riddled with hundreds of bullet holes, missing tail sections, and shattered fuselages. According to mission reports from the U.S. Army Air Forces, B-17s were sometimes found with up to 2,000 separate punctures, yet none of these catastrophes inevitably led to a crash. The durability of these aircraft became legendary, and the Germans' disbelief grew with each miraculous return. The B-17 Flying Fortress earned the nickname Flying Fortress precisely because of this incredible resilience. Boeing engineers had designed the bomber with multiple redundant systems: 4 engines, reinforced spars, self-sealing fuel tanks, and duplicate hydraulic and control lines. Even when tail assemblies, rudders, or elevators were lost, pilots could use differential engine power and subtle adjustments to maintain controlled flight. Pilots learned to compensate for yaw by throttling engines asymmetrically, sometimes using sheer ingenuity and experience to guide a nearly crippled aircraft across hundreds of miles of hostile airspace. Crew experiences add a human dimension to these mechanical marvels. Staff Sergeant Walter J. Wolf, a B-17 tail gunner, recounted in post-war interviews how his aircraft had been hit by flak over Frankfurt, losing half of its tail section. "The plane was twisting in the wind," he said, "but our pilot kept it steady. I thought we were done for, yet somehow we made it home." These accounts were verified by mission debriefings and damage assessments conducted by the U.S. Army Air Forces. The psychological effect on the Germans was profound. German fighter pilots often reported that even when a B-17 was missing critical components, it still refused to fall. Ground troops manning flak batteries expressed disbelief as heavily damaged bombers limped past their positions. Luftwaffe veteran Oberleutnant Heinrich Fischer later admitted in his memoirs that the Americans' ability to survive seemingly catastrophic hits was something we could not understand. "We were trained to destroy them, yet they kept coming back." Strategically, this resilience had a significant impact. The 8th Air Force relied on daylight precision bombing, a tactic that exposed bombers to heavy fire but aimed to minimize collateral damage and maximize industrial disruption. Losses were heavy on average. 20 to 30% of bombers did not return on long-range raids, but the survivability of damaged aircraft, even tailless ones, boosted morale among Allied crews. It also frustrated German planners, who realized that even after inflicting extensive damage, many bombers would still deliver their payloads and return to fight another day. The phenomenon of tailless flight illustrates both the ingenuity of American engineering and the extraordinary skill of bomber crews. Flying without a tail or rudder requires not only technical knowledge but exceptional courage. Pilots often relied on instinct, hand-crank trim controls, and careful management of engine thrust to maintain level flight. In several documented cases, B-17s returned from missions with rudders completely missing, elevators inoperative, or tail sections shredded by flak, yet they managed controlled landings with no fatalities among the crew. Historians have noted that these miracles were a combination of design, training, and human adaptability. The Germans, while initially incredulous, eventually recognized the pattern. The Flying Fortress was not just a plane, but a platform built for survival under extreme adversity. Witnessing such aircraft return became almost routine by late 1943, yet it never lost its shock value. By late 1943, tailies of American bombers returning without tails had become widespread among Luftwaffe pilots and German ground troops. One of the most well-documented incidents occurred during a raid on Schweinfurt, Germany, on October 14, 1943, targeting the city's ball-bearing factories vital to the German war effort. The mission involved 291 B-17s flying deep into heavily defended German airspace, escorted by a minimal number of P-47 Thunderbolts, leaving the bombers vulnerable to coordinated fighter attacks and dense flak. During the raid, several B-17s sustained catastrophic damage. One bomber, later identified in mission reports as Liberty Bell, lost nearly its entire vertical stabilizer after concentrated fire from Focke-Wulf FW-190s. The tail gunner, Staff Sergeant James K. Reed, later recounted that the rudder was gone in an instant. We spun, then stabilized. I thought we were finished, but our pilot calmly adjusted the engines and we kept flying. With differential engine power and careful throttle management, the pilot compensated for the loss of the rudder, a maneuver that required precise judgment and nerves of steel. German pilots were shocked. Lieutenant Hans-Dieter Lange of Jag Jeshwater once described witnessing a B-17 without a tail, twisting and swaying like a wounded bird, yet still flying straight and returning toward the coast. It was almost impossible to believe. Ground-based flak crews recorded similar observations, noting that even planes hit repeatedly by 88mm shells sometimes continued along their course, delivering bombs and returning home, much to German disbelief. Another extraordinary instance occurred over the industrial city of Regensburg in August 1943. A B-17 in the 97th Bomb Group sustained over 2,000 bullet holes, with its tail and elevators shredded. Pilot Captain Robert W. Williams utilized engine power asymmetry and subtle adjustments to maintain altitude and direction, demonstrating the combination of aircraft design and pilot skill. Historian Roger Freeman, in The Mighty Eighth, emphasizes that these incidents were not flukes. The B-17's structural integrity allowed it to survive concentrated attacks that would have doomed most other aircraft. Tailless or nearly crippled bombers presented unique challenges to their crews. Without a vertical stabilizer, maintaining directional stability became a constant struggle. Pilots were forced to continuously adjust throttle settings, rudder pedals if partially functional, and even the aircraft's angle of attack to compensate for yaw. Co-pilots and navigators assisted by monitoring headings and assisting in fuel management, while gunners remained alert for fighter attacks, even as wind and structural damage made aiming difficult. Every decision was life or death. Crew testimonies reveal the extraordinary human endurance required. Lieutenant John Holliday, a bombardier on a tail-damaged B-17, recalled that the aircraft twisted in the air like a corkscrew. The controls felt dead, yet somehow our pilot managed to hold it steady. I had never been more terrified or amazed in my life. Post-war damage assessments confirmed the aircraft had sustained hits to engines, fuselage, and the tail assembly, yet the plane landed with no fatalities among its 10-man crew. Historians have noted that these tailless survivals were also a psychological weapon. German soldiers and pilots, repeatedly witnessing bombers survive what seemed like fatal hits, grew frustrated and demoralized. The perception that American bombers were virtually indestructible added to the aura of invincibility surrounding the flying fortress. Luftwaffe pilots sometimes refused to engage heavily damaged planes, suspecting that even shooting them further would have no effect. The engineering of the B-17 Flying Fortress was central to these outcomes. Boeing incorporated reinforced spars, redundant control cables, and multiple engines capable of independent operation, ensuring that even with major structural failures, pilots could maintain control. Self-sealing fuel tanks reduced the risk of catastrophic fires, and armor plating helped protect critical crew positions. These features, combined with rigorous crew training and emergency procedures, meant that survival against overwhelming odds was not impossible, it was achievable. Throughout 1943 and 1944, American bomber crews learned to exploit these characteristics. Training manuals emphasized engine-out procedures, manual trim adjustments, and formation flying tactics to support damaged aircraft. Pilots practiced maintaining level flight with compromised elevators or rudders and were trained to use asymmetric engine thrust to counteract yaw. These skills, honed under extreme pressure, enabled aircraft to survive encounters that, on paper, should have been fatal. The effect on mission planning was profound. Commanders began to understand that the B-17 could absorb extreme damage and still complete bombing runs, encouraging more aggressive tactics and deep penetration missions. However, these operations remained extraordinarily dangerous. In the Schweinfurt raid alone, 60 bombers were lost, with hundreds of crew casualties. Yet the surviving, often heavily damaged aircraft became symbols of resilience, inspiring both the crews and the Allied war effort. For the crews of tail-damaged B-17s, returning to England after deep penetration bombing missions was a perilous journey that required exceptional skill, nerves of steel, and constant improvisation. A bomber missing its vertical stabilizer or rudder no longer responded predictably. It would yaw, twist, and roll with the wind, demanding continuous attention from the pilot. Every throttle adjustment, every minor correction of the yoke could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. One remarkable incident occurred with a B-17 from the 301st Bomb Group during a mission over Leipzig in September 1943. The aircraft had lost almost its entire tail assembly to flak bursts from German 88mm guns. With the rudder gone and the elevators partially inoperative, the plane began to spiral uncontrollably immediately after the bomb run. Pilot Captain Richard Dick Thompson countered by adjusting engine thrust asymmetrically, throttling the left engines higher than the right to counteract yaw. Co-pilot Lieutenant George Melton assisted by monitoring airspeed and altitude, while the navigator plotted a course to avoid additional flak concentrations. Inside the fuselage, the crew worked under extreme conditions. The tail gunner's compartment had been destroyed, exposing him to freezing air at 25,000 feet. Shrapnel injuries were common, and oxygen shortages added to the physical stress. Yet gunners continued to scan for enemy fighters, and bombardiers assisted with emergency instrument repairs. Each crew member performed their role with a level of coordination and composure that historians describe as synchronized survival under fire. The plane's behavior was terrifying. Without its tail, it rolled unpredictably, sometimes banking sharply with the slightest turbulence. Pilots had to anticipate the aircraft's reactions, often compensating in advance to prevent spins. In several documented cases, B-17s lost the entire vertical stabilizer yet managed to maintain flight for over 150 miles to Allied airfields. Ground crews on return often found the planes riddled with hundreds of bullet holes, with windows blown out, hydraulic lines severed, and rudders completely missing, but the aircraft still touched down with all crew alive. These missions were not only tests of courage but also engineering triumphs. The B-17's design allowed for such improbable survival. Reinforced wing spars and fuselage frames absorbed impacts that would have destroyed other bombers. Redundant flight control cables and systems allowed pilots to operate elevators and ailerons even if primary controls were damaged. Engines could operate independently, giving pilots the ability to maneuver despite catastrophic structural failure. German observers were consistently amazed. Luftwaffe pilots who had scored direct hits often watched as the crippled aircraft limped out of range, still carrying bombs, still returning fire. Oberleutnant Heinrich Fischer of JG-26 recalled one mission over Frankfurt. "We shot at this bomber until the tail was gone. It twisted and swung, but it did not fall. We followed it until it disappeared over the horizon. I could not believe it. How could it stay in the air?" Another incident, documented in post-war interviews with the 8th Air Force, involved a B-17 that had lost its tail rudder and half of its vertical stabilizer after intense flak over Bremen. Pilot Lieutenant James E. Blake used a combination of engine power, slight banking, and carefully timed elevator adjustments to control the aircraft. The navigator, Lieutenant Howard S. Huff, reported, "It was like flying a broken bird. One wrong move and we would have spun into the North Sea, yet somehow we kept it together. Remarkably, the plane made a controlled landing at its home base with all 10 crew members unharmed." These missions had a profound psychological impact on both sides of the conflict. For the Allied airmen, surviving such catastrophic damage reinforced morale and underscored the reliability of their aircraft. For the Germans, the phenomenon was bewildering and demoralizing. Pilots and ground observers alike recognized that even the most severe damage did not guarantee a kill. This forced changes in Luftwaffe tactics, including more concentrated attacks and attempts to target engines directly. But the resilience of the B-17 remained a formidable obstacle. Historians often emphasize that these tailless survivals were not just a matter of luck. They were the result of meticulous engineering, rigorous pilot training, and the adaptability of the crews under extreme conditions. The combination of durable airframes, redundant systems, and skilled personnel made the B-17 a flying fortress not just in name but in practice. Each successful return was a testament to the collaboration between human ingenuity and mechanical design. When tail-damaged B-17s finally touched down on Allied airfields, the mission was over, but the story was only beginning. These aircraft, battered by flak, strafing, and hundreds of bullets, were tangible proof of a combination of human skill, engineering excellence, and sheer determination. For the crews, returning safely was both a physical and psychological triumph. They had survived conditions that, in the eyes of the enemy, should have been fatal. The engineering of the B-17 Flying Fortress was central to these miraculous returns. Boeing's design emphasized durability, redundancy, and survivability. Reinforced wing spars, multiple engines capable of independent operation, self-sealing fuel tanks, and redundant control cables allowed a plane to fly even after losing its tail or rudder. Pilots could counteract yaw by varying engine thrust, use manual trim adjustments to control pitch, and rely on partially functioning control surfaces to maintain level flight. These innovations transformed seemingly hopeless situations into survivable ones. For the crews, survival was a testament to courage and teamwork. Pilots, co-pilots, navigators, gunners, and engineers improvised continuously, managing injuries, frozen temperatures, and equipment failures. Lieutenant Robert W. Williams, who piloted a tailless B-17 over Regensburg, later reflected, "The aircraft itself was remarkable, but it was the crew that made it fly. Every one of us had to be alert, precise, and calm. One mistake could have cost all our lives." This human determination combined with a mechanical ingenuity to achieve the extraordinary. The impact on the Germans was equally significant. Luftwaffe pilots and flak crews were repeatedly forced to witness bombers survive what should have been fatal damage. German airmen, trained to destroy these aircraft with concentrated attacks, found themselves frustrated and incredulous. Historian Roger Freeman notes in The Mighty Eighth that such observations contributed to the growing perception of the flying fortress as nearly indestructible, reinforcing Allied psychological superiority in the air war over Europe. Tailless survivals also influenced tactical and strategic thinking. Allied planners recognized that the durability of the B-17 allowed for more aggressive bombing campaigns deep into Germany, with the knowledge that even damaged aircraft often returned to base. Crews became more confident in pushing missions to their limits, while engineers continued refining aircraft design and training to maximize survivability. Each successful return contributed not only to morale, but also to the development of aviation. Techniques and emergency procedures still studied in military flight training today. Perhaps most importantly, these events left a lasting legacy of human resilience. Flying without a tail required improvisation, calm decision-making, and unshakable trust among crew members. The phenomenon of returning tailless aircraft became symbolic of the broader Allied war effort. Even when circumstances appeared hopeless, preparation, skill, and courage could overcome seemingly impossible odds. According to legend, crews sometimes referred to these aircraft affectionately as the unkillable birds, a moniker reflecting both awe and gratitude. Historians caution that such nicknames are anecdotal, but the documented facts are indisputable. Bombers sustained catastrophic damage, including the complete loss of rudders or stabilizers, and returned safely with their crews intact. These flights became iconic examples of aerial endurance, engineering brilliance, and human determination. The story of tailless bombers also reminds us of a broader lesson in wartime innovation. In an era of near-constant danger, the integration of mechanical resilience and human ingenuity made survival possible. The planes and their crews exemplified what could be achieved when technology and training were applied to extreme conditions. They also illustrate a key principle in history and warfare. Sometimes, survival is not just about avoiding danger, but mastering it through preparation, skill, and courage. Decades later, the legend of these tailless B-17s continues to inspire historians, engineers, and aviation enthusiasts. They appear in documentaries, military studies, and museum exhibits, demonstrating the unprecedented combination of design, teamwork, and bravery that defined the Allied strategic bombing campaign. For every German soldier or pilot who watched a damaged bomber return, and for every crew member who navigated impossible odds, these aircraft became enduring symbols of resilience. Ultimately, the tailless B-17s are a reminder that even when shattered, when critically damaged, or seemingly doomed, resilience and determination can carry us home. History remembers these aircraft not just as machines, but as monuments to human courage, ingenuity, and the will to survive. They prove that with skill, innovation, and teamwork, the impossible can become reality one miraculous flight at a time.